Hello and welcome. Thank you for joining us today for the complimentary ICMI webinar, Overcoming Technology Challenges, Solutions for Any Size Contact Center, sponsored by USAN. I'm Erica Strother, Community Specialist at ICMI, and I'll be your moderator today. Before we begin, let's take care of a few housekeeping items. First, make sure you disable your pop-up blocker if it's on. You will notice there are several icons at the bottom of the console window. The first allows you to see the presentation slides, so make sure this one is maximized. Next is the Q&A icon. We will be hosting a live Q&A throughout this webinar, and you can participate by asking questions at any time throughout the presentation. All you have to do is type your question into that window and then click Submit. Now, if you're experiencing any technical difficulties during the presentation, you can click the question mark icon on the console to access the Event Help Guide. Clicking on the other icons on the console will give you access to speaker bios, more information about our sponsor USAN, as well as information about upcoming ICMI events. You can also download a version of today's presentation in PDF form. This presentation will be made available for on-demand viewing following the live event today. You will receive an email in the next couple of days with instructions for viewing the recorded presentation. As you're watching the live event today, we encourage you to be social. You can access your Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn accounts directly through this event console. Please take note of the event hashtags and handles on your screen and share what you learn. And now it is my pleasure to introduce today's speakers. We are honored to have two industry experts speaking on behalf of ICMI today. Our first speaker is Todd Hixson, an industry veteran with more than 13 years' experience in contact center operations. We also have Lindsey Weems speaking today on behalf of Pepsi Bottling Ventures, where she's the contact center manager. And speaking for our sponsor USAN is Lloyd Olson. Lloyd is the Chief Operating Officer at USAN. All three of our speakers have some great insights to share with you today. So at this time, I'll turn the presentation over to Todd to get us started.
Thank you, Erica. You know, as I was asked to think about technology and the history of call centers and how it impacts all of us, I thought about my grandmother, who went to school in a horse and buggy, and how everybody would always talk about the good old days. Grandmother's theory was there was no such thing. Without technology, it was very hard. She preferred a microwave and a washing machine any day to her washboard and hanging things on the clothesline. I thought about how that applied to me in my career in contact centers, and remembered when I first started out that we grew so fast, we literally had a cable run across the street in San Antonio, Texas, with the little ramps you see at concerts on it, to keep people from pulling the wires out of the wall as we had businesses connected together across the street, with lines of agents waiting for the first available desk to jump in. We certainly have come a long way since then. And as I thought about it, how could I bucket this into the three biggest challenges? I thought about things I believe apply to all of us. Those three things are easy use, maintenance, how do we take care of it, and of course, the reason we're all in business, or most of us are in business, return on investment. So I take this a step deeper. I would like all of you to think about out there how this applies to your individual businesses. You know, we can all sort of get siloed. And as we get siloed, we think about just our little piece, which is important, and I'll get into that into a minute. But also think about the totality of your company and the big picture. Let's look at ease of use. First, our primary purpose is helping customers, or for most of us it is. So when we look at technology, can we use a BIT, or built-in test, to use some Toyota production system terminology? Is our technology helping us create an emotional connection with our customers? Is it driving first call resolution? And is it building for the future? What it shouldn't be is, am I turning my agents into admins or reporting technicians? Am I turning them into writers when they're not? If this is an area that we're going to move to with our company, well, then we need to have the training and get them prepared. We also need to make sure it's not flavor of the week. Gee, the Joneses have one, so I need one too. What does it do? I don't know. And finally, Does it hinder our coaches, our leads, our managers from being able to do the job they're there for? Are they turning into needing to spend half a day working in technology instead of being able to help the agents who in turn help our customers? The next tenet I thought about is maintenance. How many of us have got technology in our life and it's a wonderful thing until it doesn't work? And I think about myself. Do I have to call my internet provider? If the internet went out right now for many of us while we're on this call, we wouldn't be on this call. So do we currently have the IT and workforce management talent we need? If we don't, can we train them? Or do we need to hire somebody? Have we figured this cost into our technology? Also, accessibility. Is it a seamless login? Does it talk to our other technology? I think about what language it's written in. Is it something our agents understand and can use? Do we have that magic flux capacitor like in Back to the Future? Well, we couldn't get to the future without it. And of course, Michael Fox, while he could drive the car, could not put in the flux capacitor without the doctor there. Finally, do we need one? How many of us have looked around at our technology on our desktops and said, hey, what's that? Oh, we used to use that and it was cool. How many of us have bothered to check with our agents, do we really use it? And I had a reporting team member one time who had the built-in test that after about 3 months, she wouldn't reproduce a report for a couple days. Oftentimes, nobody even asked her what happened to that report. Are we really getting technology we need to help with our growth and our customers? And is it in the cloud or is it just cloudy? And by that I mean a lot of times we'll say, hey, it's in the cloud, it's going to work great. Is it partially in the cloud? Is it all the way in the cloud? Do we truly know where it's going? All of these things are challenges that we have to be prepared to face when we adopt new technology. Finally, ROI. Is it a fit for your business? Hey, it may be great for a big business, but if it's somebody who's just selling lug nuts to put on a car, do they really need to know every comment and every click their customer made on a website? Is the KPI output or key performance indicator of the technology really needed, relevant, or does it even exist? And what's the cost of keeping up? It may be great today, but do we have planned in our plans where it's going to go in the future and what the long-term payoff is? As I go a click deeper, I talked earlier about silos, and I thought about it. I'm sort of a race car fan. Our contact centers are really like a race car team. And by that I mean there's a whole lot of little pieces who are very focused on their own individual jobs that make up the whole of who we are. As I think about it, our agents are like the drivers. Our coaches are like the crew chief, the guy standing up on the pit box for you guys who don't watch racing. That's the guy who's really in charge, but the driver gets all the credit. And then we have our behind-the-scenes operations team, our mechanics, our pit crew, the spotter who's sitting there looking for trouble ahead, and the telemetry team, who's like our reporting team. You can see from the slide how I've compared each one of these, and I'll get into this deeper. Of course, we also have the people that are the ones that put the whole thing on, the owners, the sponsors, and finance, and, well, everybody seems to have finance nowadays. And finally, the reason we're here, our fans or our customers. So let's look at how each one of these relates to our challenges. First, the driver. Is he too big or too little? I always think about that ad on TV where the two drivers come out and one of them's about 5'6" and one of them's 6'2". Well, this happens in racing. All of a sudden, somebody gets hurt or something happens and he can't be there. They put the short driver in the big guy's car. Well, he can't even reach the pedals. Is there anything wrong with the car, or in our case, the technology? Absolutely not. It's a fantastic race car. Heck, it might be the one that just won the Daytona 500 last year. But our operator can't reach the pedals. So we have to make sure when we adopt technology that our agents can actually use it and know why they need it. Next, our coaches or our managers. And the picture in the slide is probably one of the greatest race car drivers ever, A.J. Foyt. Well, what's this great race car driving doing in a fight? Well, this is a true story. The telemetry didn't work or technology in a race, and the next thing you know, he was in victory lane trying to beat up the driver they were giving the trophy to because he thought his driver didn't or won. The whole reason? Technology that didn't work properly. So as your crew chief or manager, they have to make sure they have the skills to interpret the technology you have. Let's take a look now at the maintenance or the behind the scenes for us. And I'm not going to read every line in this slide, But if you look at the pictures at the top, you can see a pit stop going on. And the last slide to the right, you'll see that hose flying in the air. That's the hose that fuels the car. The pit crew didn't do their job right, and there's fuel flying everywhere. How does that relate to us? Well, we need to look at our IT infrastructure. As we get more and more technology, the first thing is, do they even have the bandwidth? They've already got full-time jobs. Are we ramping up our IT teams and adding members and giving them the training and understanding they need to do that job? We look at our analytics and reporting team. They want to help, and they have the training. But does the new technology put out a KPI in a consumable format? Is it something that they're having to spend an hour and a half behind the scenes, letting the two technologies talk to each other, or being able to interpret data perhaps they haven't been trained on? Now, subject near and dear to my heart, workforce management. We think about probably our command center team or our real-time team, that they're going to be the first ones that hear, hey, something isn't working. Have they been trained? Do they have the proper escalation path? But something we may not think about is, how does this technology tie into our forecasting? Is it going to add handle time? Is it going to slow our agents down in the learning curve? We need to look at all these things as we do our business plans to make sure we're staffing appropriately for the right time of the day with the right trained agents. And of course, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention our quality team. Are our KPIs changing? Are we letting our quality team even know we have new technology and saying, hey, cut these guys some slack for a few days? They're learning something new. There's going to be hesitations. There's going to be pauses. There's going to be ums and ahs. Or have we made sure that technology is seamless before we even launched it? Finally, as we tie back to our ROI, who writes the check? Well, the owner looks at it. Okay, well, I'm going to get this, and you're saying we need it, but how is it going to help me distance myself from the competition? Is it going to set our business apart, or even is it going to make my agents happy? Is it going to make my company happy where I have less turnover? And how does this tie into the big picture? Of course, the stockholders are like the sponsors on the car. If you've got a winning car, they're going to pay more money. And finally, finance. Well, as I'm sure we all know in this day and age, if finance sees it as something that's not an integral part of the operation, it'll be one of the first things cut. So they need to make sure and understand not only why we need the technology, but why we're going to need it in the future and how it's going to help us achieve our financial goals. And of course, last but not least, the fans. As we look at this stadium here, some of you may be familiar with it, some of you may not, but you're probably asking, how did we jump from race cars to football? Well, the reason I share this stadium is, and I've used this at other presentations, how many of us would be wowed if we had a whole day that nobody missed work? Sometimes I ask the question, and the next question I'll ask is, well, what if we had a whole week that nobody missed work? And I get a few folks that raise their hands, and they're like, wow, that's awesome. That's really cool. Well, let's take it a step further. This stadium here is one up in Nebraska. And I bring it up, not because I'm a Nebraska fan, but because they've gone 50 years straight with sellouts. What if you could create that kind of culture with your customers and your agents? How will your technology add to that, where we want to be at work? We don't care if the team's good or bad. We don't care where the coaches are like. Well, yeah, we care. But whether they're good or bad, we're always there to support our customers. We're always there to support our product. And we're always there because we want to be part of being at work every day. What an awesome outcome. I truly believe that as we go forward in technology and don't have cable stretched across the street, we can achieve this. But we're going to have to take each one of these considerations that I've talked about today into place, and we're going to have to make sure they fit our company. How are we going to do this? Well, here's a few best practices. Training at every level, and make sure it's investment in the future. If I learn how to do it today, am I still going to have the skill set tomorrow? If I teach my current agents, are my new agents going to have this? Am I working with my training department? And are they building it in our training plan to not only build what we do today, but as our technology advances, we're making sure we have that recurring training built in, end to end, all the way from our planning and our budget phase to the recurring training needed when, my technology changed. They launch a new version of Explorer. What do I do now? We also need to make sure, and this is a key part to me, is we have vendor partnering. And by that I mean, do we have somebody who's working with our technology companies on a daily basis Do they understand our business? Are we nimble? Are we delivering as represented? You know, it said it'd do this, it did today. Well, my business changed, but the product doesn't work. Well, maybe it's not any fault of technology. Maybe we weren't doing a good job of reaching out to our technology partners. And even better, if we have that dedicated liaison, are we letting our technology partners know what's coming down the pipe? I think about several of the industry events I go to every year. To me, that's one of the biggest takeaways. Isn't just where we're at today, but where we're going for the future. And as I walk around and talk to the vendors and the technology partners, how can they design for the future if they don't know where folks think we're going? And of course, how do we know where we think we're going if we're not talking to our customers? And this all ties into my last part, the continual improvement, ROI, the return on investment at every level, and constantly making sure the what's in it for me is at every level, and people understand the importance of technology. Because when they understand it, then they'll know why it needs to be easy to use, why we need the training at every turn, why we need to make sure we have the folks to maintain it in the background, and how it ties into the big picture of our company. Everything I talked about today works in big call centers, probably works in small call centers. But as we turn it over to our next speaker, I'd like you to think about that race car team again. If we have a giant race car team with 4 drivers and millions, literally millions of dollars of investment, it's pretty easy. But what about the smaller race car teams who really have to watch every single dollar they invest and where that money goes and make sure there's no mistake at any turn? Because while that mistake may be something you can overcome with a big team, it can be disastrous for a small team. With that, I'd like to close and turn it over to somebody who can really show you the importance of that small call center and what it takes to have success. Lindsey?
Thank you, Todd. I really appreciate that. One of Todd's last closing comments was the fact that the content that he discussed today would apply to large contact centers as well as small contact centers, and I completely agree. I think for those of you that manage or lead or interact with small contact centers, the one thing you know for sure is that analytics team, the workforce management team, the QA team, the infrastructure, that's a hat that few people actually wear, or a hat that few people wear in an organization because you have to wear many hats. So today, to give you an idea of the size of my contact center and my perspective, what I wanted to do is share with you just a little bit about my organization, and hopefully I think you will be able to take away from our interaction today a few best practices, a few questions, and a few things that you can think about as you're walking through or looking at a new technology solution or going through an implementation. Okay, so the 3 biggest challenges in implementing a technology solution in a small contact center from my perspective are scalability, time to market, and ongoing support. So first of all, when speaking about scalability, most solutions are scaled to grow along with your business. In a small contact center, scalability means that the solution can work for even the smallest of customers who have limited resources. You can see by my graphic that small contact centers have to think of scalability from a completely different context, as I will share with you today. Secondly, the time to market. Factors that may not impact a technology implementation in a large organization can freeze progress for a small contact center. There are some steps you can take to better prepare for interruptions or delays in the implementation timeline. And then lastly, ongoing support. In small organizations, there are no experts on staff. Everybody's a generalist. And so the question is, how do you utilize the history that you have to help minimize incident impact in the future and make the ongoing support process much less stressful? So in terms of scalability, most would agree that the size of a company is relational to the size of its contact center. For example, my contact center is a 30-person operation. Our company as a whole, Pepsi Balling Ventures, has 2,200 employees. So small company equals small contact center. There is also a possibility that the size of your enterprise system, though, may not be scaled to the size of the company. For example, we use SAP. I've heard often that SAP is really a enterprise system that's geared for very large organizations, and we're a small organization that uses SAP. As such, a lot of customization may be required to implement even the simplest of technology solutions. So it's important to assess whether or not the enterprise system and the suggested technology solutions are scaled appropriately to meet the objectives of the organization without excessive customization or any customization at all. So I'm sure quite a few of you may have been in an implementation and found that a technology can't meet one or more of your requirements because the software is not scalable to meet the needs of the organization. So then you have to make some decisions. How do you proceed? Do you abandon that specific requirement? Do you create a workaround, or do you customize? It's been my experience that because IT resources are limited in small organizations, the contact center leadership team must make a more proactive approach to be part of those decisions and understand why. So I have a few questions that I think you can ask as you're going through a technology implementation that could help you really understand why your IT is leading you down one path as opposed to another. So that first thing is you, in running a smaller organization and running a smaller contact center, you really have to be more intimately in tune with the language, the foundation, and understanding exactly the platform that your IT group is going to build your solution on top of. So you need to start asking questions like, what enterprise solutions are we using? So you may have customer relationship management and enterprise resource planning systems, supply chain management. Those all apply to my industry and consumer goods and services. And certainly there are other applications, et cetera, that may apply to yours. So understand what functions impact your business and what solutions are you using for those. Secondly, why did your organization choose the enterprise solution? Is it because your head of IT had years and years of experience using that solution, or they thought that in the future that particular solution could grow to meet the demands and needs of the business in the future? I think it's important to understand how that all plays into it, because IT is very proud of all the systems and technology and everything that they put into place, and you just need to understand why it is that those systems exist. All right, the next one is, what are all the solutions available that can integrate into or with our enterprise system? I think this is key. My experience is that the IT group will lead you down, if they can, the path of what they feel is least resistance. So they'll say, for example, in my organization, we use SAP. So we should use SAP CRM as our customer relationship management software. But it's really important to know all of the different options that exist that can integrate into your enterprise system, because that just helps you be more informed and be better able to participate in the discussions, so that if you, in the long run, you all can feel good about the solution that was chosen for your organization. And then lastly, will I be able to see a real live example of an implementation similar to our project in scale? I can't enforce how important this one is, because you need to be able to see that your vendor and your business partners understand the nuances and challenges of a smaller organization. Because there's a lot of us out there, but most of the time, in my experience, technology solutions are really scaled for larger organizations. All right, so the second challenge is time to market. So you see my little graphic here. If you work for a small organization, a lot of times you have to get in line. So you put out there your request for resources, your request for a technology solution, and you're prioritized along with everybody else in the business. So the first challenge I see is procuring internal IT resources for your project. And the second one is, once you do have the resources, thinking about setbacks in the implementation cycle that may delay your project go live. So again, in my example, in my experience, our IT department is small in scale, and it has to support every business unit within the entire company. Depending on the size of your company, you may experience the same structure, or you may be fortunate to have dedicated IT resources or IT resources that are shared with other business units, such as sales or marketing, for example. In our situation, not having dedicated IT resources can contribute to an increase in the time to market for the implementation of new programs that we've selected. So once you have IT signed on and dedicated resources allocated to your project, any delays in the implementation cycle can mean that not all IT resources will be available throughout the project lifecycle as originally planned. At best, the new go-live date will be minimally impacted. At worst, it could have disastrous impacts on your organization's ability to meet the needs of your customers. So I can say I've been through a situation where we've had a delay in an implementation, and I believe it could have been reduced by implementing a few best practices. So that first best practice is carefully consider the vendor's proposed time to market and what internal resources they require for the implementation. What I mean by that is internal resources meaning what can your own IT group support. Your vendor is always going to do whatever it takes to get you to market on time. It's those internal issues that pop up and that you experience within your organization that can, in my experience, can delay you. So when your own IT estimates what resources available, just make sure you understand how the numbers were determined and whether or not they gave themselves a little extra leeway. I think you all have heard the adage that it's better to underpromise and overdeliver, and that's exactly what you're looking for here. If possible, list the events that would cause the longest delay in the implementation cycle. Consider not only IT resources, but also project team resources. And then lastly, understand what additional resources will be procured in order to complete the implementation should an event occur. The last thing you want is for some type of delay to occur or issue to pop up, or your team of 3 becomes a team of 2 and you haven't necessarily thought through what other additional resources are available. Can your vendor help you? Will your own IT department or group allocate resources to hire contractors, or is everybody going to have to work a lot of overtime to make sure that your project goes live within a decent amount of time? And then lastly, the ongoing support piece for a technology implementation. So one of the things I think that's really important, and you may not think about this on a regular basis, but if you've ever had any experience where you add your own internal SLA to your vendor's SLA and you say, these two things don't add up, it's painful. So you always want to make sure that your own internal service level agreements with your own IT department, in addition to your vendor SLAs, match your expectations for problem resolution and ongoing support. Because if they're not planned for or addressed, any issues that you have can cause a loss of productivity, inefficiency, a lot of manual process, definitely frustrated staff, and a customer impact. So my suggestion before you go live is very simple, seemingly, but just make sure that your vendor, your internal IT, and the organization's sense of urgency all match up. If not, use your influence skills to modify the SLAs and the positive impact it will have on the organization's ability to provide service. Next, and Todd hinted at this too, and he discussed this, everybody has to know why the system works the way it does. And the challenge is as your leadership team changes over, as the IT team changes over, it's just that, people move on and around in the organization, some of that tribal knowledge gets lost. So it's really important for in a small contact center to document any change requests, customizations, and system functionality from your organization's perspective. Remember, your vendor will document from their perspective why change requests were put in and customizations and system functionalities. But sometimes you need to know the thought process behind it from your own perspective. Definitely there will be a time in the future when someone will say, why does the system work this way? And they'll think that it's broken, it's inefficient, or it's not operating properly, but in reality it's functioning as designed. And just having that back-end knowledge can help you for future iterations of the software and to help explain to your end users why the system behaves the way it does. All right, lastly, you all have seen this. What is my work? How do I do it? And why is it important? And it's a concept that should apply even to the simple escalation process for incident resolution, but I don't think most people think about it this way. History does not have to repeat itself. So if it does, we need to be able to look at our incident history and help us improve the experience the next time an issue arises. So my biggest takeaway from this and learning all of this is a few things. Number one, designate someone within your contact center to attend administrator training. This is if you're in a small organization. The goal is not to have someone be a backup administrator. It's more to have another set of eyes and a different perspective on the system capabilities. If you only have representation from IT in these trainings, you'll be missing out on an opportunity to use real-life experience to shape views and thoughts on the new application and its capabilities. And then secondly, track incidents. Your IT group definitely tracks incidents, so you can either ask to have push reporting, have them manually or push out reporting to you that tracks all the incidents and what happens, or if you absolutely have to, track incidents manually from the contact center's perspective. So you should be able to answer the questions below as you're looking at your reporting. So what happened? What circumstances, actions, or behaviors caused the incident? What steps, actions, or behaviors or changes were made to resolve the issue? How long did it take to resolve the issue? And what could we have done differently to minimize the impact? Recently, our CRM system exhibited an issue where a certain event would take place. And after 3 successive issues, I had enough data to quantify for our leadership team the impact that issues had. Now, the challenge here was that our IT group was saying we have a manual process in place so the impact was minimal, but that's not actually the case. You can't build a case to improve the sense of urgency if you don't document from your customer's perspective and your own perspective the impact to the business. So that's a learning that I think is really important for small contact centers as they're implementing a new technology solution. So in conclusion, I think if you can take some of the things that I've talked about today that I'm intimately familiar with, unfortunately, I hope in the future when you're going through a technology implementation, you'll be able to ease the transition and ease some of the stress of going through that, especially when you're running a small contact center and your resources are limited. I just want to say in closing that I appreciate Erica, thank you ICMI, and USON for giving me the opportunity to share my experiences with the audience and you regarding small contact centers.
Great. Thank you, Lindsey and Todd. It was definitely interesting to hear both of your perspectives as they pertain to larger contact centers and small contact centers, and to hear the differences and the similarities that both share when it comes to implementing new technologies. At this time, I'm going to turn the presentation over to Lloyd Olson, who's going to tell you a little bit about a new solution that USAN has to offer.
Thank you, Erica. Just want to start out by saying the issues that Todd and Lindsey highlighted were spot on as far as what's going on in the industry today. And while it seems very simple that you can choose the right technology and the right vendor, it's really not that simple. And oddly enough, as the customer engagement process becomes more complicated, choosing the right partner and choosing the right vendor and the right technology becomes more complicated as well. But before I get into specific technology challenges, I wanted to spend a few minutes outlining what USAN sees as some of the major challenges from a technology perspective. These challenges, if they're handled correctly, they will become a competitive advantage for your company. If they're handled poorly, they can very quickly become your company's Achilles heel. Going back a ways, back when Todd was draping cables across the streets of San Antonio, there are just a dozen or so companies selling contact center technologies that basically auto-dialed a few telephone numbers and sent an occasional fax. Regulations weren't very tight. The customer expectations are pretty low. So life, even though you're still draping cables across the street, from a contact center perspective, was relatively simple. Within a very short time frame, chat, auto email came along, making it a bit more challenging from a telephony perspective. But basically, you still had a fairly simple process, and the expectations weren't all that high. Today the challenge is much more complicated. You're required to support all the traditional channels. Back in the days, the basic voice channels. But now also you have your social channels. You get involved with big data. They talk about everything going across the cloud. And then at the end of the day, oh yeah, you need to cut the cost out of your contact centers. So the challenge really is growing, and it's becoming quite ominous. But today you have dozens of options. So we moved from the very simple 1 or 2 companies selling a dialer into dozens of options. And we could spend the entire day or even a week considering all the questions related to contact center technologies. But given I only have about 20 minutes today, we're going to focus on a few that I think are very important. One of the first things we need to recognize is it's not just about taking calls. And I think we read about this in the magazines and hear about it on TV, but really making a great customer experience or making a very high quality customer engagement. But really what happens is all that happens before and during and after each interaction is what really differentiates you. What I mean by that is, and I think Lindsey touched on it briefly, is the integration with all the other systems like CRM and like ERP. Having that information available prior to the call, during the call, is going to really make or break the call that you're currently on. But regardless of the size, the customer's expectations are for a quality experience and a good interaction, whether it be on the phone or on the web or through social media or a combination of the channels. Again, it's more than just answering the telephone call or making a call out to the customer. One of the things that you look at is voice. Even though that it's been one of the first channels, it is still the preferred channel. But with alarming speed, other channels are becoming the mainstream and a key component of every end-to-end customer process. Most commonly, today's contact centers must have the ability to work in concert with legacy systems like CRM and ERP, as Lindsey mentioned, as well as third-party processes like payments and other systems that support the call. So now we're not just talking about, as I step back into just making and taking calls, but now you're making and taking calls, you're going across social media, you're integrated with back-end systems and processes, and all of a sudden this thing starts getting out of control unless, like Todd and Lindsey brought up earlier, you choose a really good partner to team with for your contact center. As we move forward, one of the things that I want to look at is the different way that the channels are moving forward. And this is one of my favorite slides of all time. It's getting harder. As us that run contact centers or sell technology into contact centers, everything is more difficult, everything is more complicated, especially when you look at some of the people that have companies that have aging technology. The price to upgrade is unreasonable, or worse yet, some of the platforms can't be upgraded. And if they can, many of the internal IT teams, like Lindsey mentioned, are swamped and have contact centers at the bottom of the IT list. So when you look at this slide in front of us, moving from left to right on the top of the slide, you can see that voice has been the primary channel for decades, and it still is. And when you look at the different studies that have been done, the quality of the interaction decreases when you look at the number of channels that are implemented, and the overall service levels are dropping due to the company's inability to deliver a consistent experience across multiple channels. And the reason this happens is oftentimes you get tied up with a vendor or partner that is very, very good at voice. They have an older system that's an older monolithic system. They try to tack on the other channels, and you don't really get a well-orchestrated call or well-orchestrated customer interaction. But the thing that even makes this even more difficult now is customers are in their 24/7 always-on attitude that always want to integrate and communicate with your company over the channel that they choose. So there's basically some good news and some bad news. We'll start off with the bad news. There is more trouble on the horizon. Just when you think you've kind of solved the multi-channel challenge, even saying that's a little bit of a challenge, here comes the challenge of big data. Big data has been known and been talked about for quite some time inside of other worlds, but big data is headed towards the contact center. And the technologies you choose need to be able to collect it, manage it, and more importantly, you need to learn how to leverage it within the conversations within your clients. The good news is some of the modern cloud offerings have the ability to move your company into this well-oiled multi-channel big data machine. Multi-channel is a reality. I don't think that's any news to anybody that's on this call because we hear about it and we read about it in every magazine we pick up. But the bad thing is companies are relying on their contact center technologies to address all the traditional channels plus all these new channels. The harsh reality is while customer engagements are becoming more complex and tougher to implement from an IT perspective, the budgets that you have to work with are being reduced. and your expectations from your customers are rising. So it really puts the contact center between a rock and a hard spot. This is okay if the voice channels are implemented correctly and the non-voice channels are able to shift the cost load away from the agents and provide a rich customer experience in the alternative channels. That makes a lot of sense, and there's been tons of studies that outline how much cheaper it is to do a channel via chat and email versus having a live agent. The key to making these channels work, however, is directly related to the platform's ability to integrate with other legacy systems, internal data resources, and external systems. A lot of the older technology solutions that migrated from a premise-based solution into a cloud-based solution are having tremendous difficulty in making these integrations work. Again, along the same idea of multi-channel as a reality, contact centers of all sizes. It doesn't matter if it's a 4,000 or 5,000 person contact center, or like Lindsey said, some contact center like hers that has 30 agents. They need to be able to communicate to their customers in dialogues across the channels the customer prefers. The bottom line is, companies must be able to service their customers in the channel the customer wants, or they're going to risk losing that customer. There's a survey taken during the first quarter of 2013 that compared how many different channels are used by different age groups. And there's a lot more information in the survey that I'm actually going to share with you, but some of the information that stood out to me was when you look at Generation Z, Generation Z is described as 18 to 22 years old, and looking at the technology Twitter, in the Generation Z, 31% of the Generation Z participants have adopted the use of Twitter to contact companies. So opposed to just following Justin Bieber on Twitter, they're actually using this from a commercial perspective. In contrast, the young baby boomers, this is age groups 46 to 55 years old, only 11% have adopted Twitter to contact companies, so only about 1/3 compared to the Generation Z. You can move down to the next channel, SMS. The Generation Z, again, 18 to 22 years old, 34% have used SMS to request assistance from a company as a customer service perspective. The young baby boomers, 46 to 55, again, only 14%. So again, we look at the channels, and one of the slides that we had up earlier where all the channels are beginning to grow and grow and grow and continuously grow, you can see that Generation Z is going to start driving a good share of the economy. So we as companies need to be prepared to go ahead and tackle whether it be Twitter or Facebook or SMS or whatever comes next. Also, before it used to be a 9-to-5 job, we're in the midst of the 24/7 always-on customer environment where the customer is driving the relationship. And I think it's really key to point that out, that in the past, most companies always thought they drove the relationship with the customer. In today's environment, the customer really drives the relationship, and they want to drive it across the channel that they chose. So when you look at it, there's really some critical success factors that you have to consider when choosing technology. And I think it's Lindsey that brought it up, and looking at it from a perspective is, don't let the technology define your business. And what I mean by that is oftentimes customers or companies, they adopt a technology platform that they have to bend their business around to meet the technology. And it really doesn't do them a lot of good because they, by the time they end up bending their business around the technology platform, it's really not delivering the product or the message they want. So it really is important that as you look at a critical success factor of the platform, that you consider how flexible is that platform and how well can it integrate into my business process versus having it go the other way around. The other piece is don't be trapped by monolithic technologies. A lot of companies brag about how long their system has been in service and how many millions of customers are on it. And that's all an interesting story, and I think it proves that they have a viable product. But one of the issues you have in a dynamic marketplace like contact centers is these old monolithic technologies oftentimes can't integrate with the systems you need to support the conversations you get into during your customer interactions. And they also can't synchronize with the multiple systems that are going to fulfill the whole conversation, being voice, SMS, whatever other channel they choose. And thirdly, don't let the deployment slow you down. So many of the issues you have today, because these systems are very IT intensive, they're very technologically complex, is oftentimes you don't get your product to market, you don't get your message to market because you're slowed down by the implementation or the changes inside your system. So you need to select a deployment strategy and a vendor that will support both the short-term and the long-term business requirements that your company has. So today I'm going to talk a little bit about two different deployment options. One's premise, which we've all known for years, and again, back when Todd was dragging cables across the streets of San Antonio, premise was the only option that you had. Over the last 4 or 5 years, cloud has become basically dominates all the conversations around deployment options. It's important to point out that whether you're a small or a large center, one of the first decisions you need to make is what type of infrastructure do I need to best service my customers. So when you look at premise versus cloud, you have to really look at internally to your company, how can you support these and which one will best work for your customer base. So when you look at some of the data that's been published about the different type of deployment options, we'll look at the cloud, for example, because that's the cloud is what gets all the news today, and I think where most of the people have most of their questions and concerns about implementing across the cloud versus premise. When you go to the cloud, people assume you lose control of the application, you don't have the flexibility, and it's really almost quite the opposite. In fact, cloud-based infrastructures right now are the fastest growing area in the call center industry. In fact, DMG predicts that it'll almost double between 2013 and 2015, or 2015. That's a big deal because when you look at the magnitude of the decision of changing your contact center from one implementation form factor to another, it's a huge, huge decision because that's one part of your company that cannot fail. But it's interesting when you look at the proportion of call center seats in the cloud will reach about 18% by 2015, and that's just up from 2.2% back in 2008. Initially, the recession drove kind of the financially pressed companies to embrace the cloud because of the quick deployment and the great value and the low capital cost. But now the functional gap between the premise-based solutions and the cloud is narrowing or almost non-existent today. The cloud is becoming the more viable and more logical solution for almost any size call center, whether it be tens of thousands of agents or just 10 to 20 agents. The different deployment options and why would you ever move to the cloud? There are certainly some advantages to premise-based solutions. You have control. You own the asset. There's a lot of things that some companies really like about that aspect of premise-based solutions. But USAN has chosen to just purely focus on the cloud services, as we believe it's going to be what helps companies get over some of the major hurdles they face. Budget limitations. I don't know anybody that has an unlimited budget these days, and certainly the contact center is one of the places that gets squeezed very quickly for budgets. So when you look at implementing new technologies, do you really want to spend the money, or is the money available to be spent? Again, I think everybody, Todd and Lindsey, both brought up the minimal IT resources. Call centers, just by nature, for some reason unknown, they usually fall in the bottom of the IT stack. So do you have the proper resources available, or can you move to a cloud vendor that actually has those resources available to support the system? Outgrowing the current capabilities, a couple slides back, we talked about the fact that the channels are adding and adding and adding upon each other. How do you keep up with it? Mostly if your IT can't keep up with implementing the new technologies. Multi-channel requirements, we talked about those pieces. Seasonality needs, geographic needs. All these things are minimized by moving to cloud because you don't have to create the infrastructure over and over and over again. These technologies, these ideas, these strategies are shared by multiple customers when you get inside of the cloud providers. Also, USAN has a good variety of resources. If you want to look at, does it make sense for my company to move to the cloud? What are the risks and the reward of moving to the cloud? These resources are available on our website, or you can give us a call, and we can help you create a model that will best work for your specific situation. Or if it doesn't work for your specific situation and you decide this makes more sense to stick with the premise-based system, we're all good with that as well. But now you look at the typical call center technology options, kind of the pros and cons, if you would. With technology and customer preferences evolving so quickly, sooner or later you're going to need to make changes that your small contact center system can't handle. You can either do nothing, or you can rip and replace the system you have with another system. But beware of being forced into the long-term contracts full of expensive upgrades and hardware and services if you choose to stick with the premise route. For larger contact center products, the customizations required to field these systems, and is incredibly complicated and costly and takes months, even years to complete. There you have to be aware of the largest systems whose abilities to expand is limited to their own products. Most of them aren't going to be favorable at extending into competitive products or other products. Since many call centers have already purchased best-of-breed products over time, their mix of products may be not compatible with these new larger systems. So what does the ideal solution look like? We talked about premise, we talked about cloud-based, we talked about all the different channels, and we talked about integrations. But when you really look at the ideal solution in today's marketplace, it has to be a modern platform because the modern platforms have the capabilities to do the expansions and the integrations. The ideal solution needs to take the best from both the small and the large options, and that adds on top of it the ability to extend the capability to accommodate the changes. So think about it as the slide shows here, kind of a set of building blocks, and each one of the building blocks is a feature or capability inside your contact center. So it's very modular and componentized. Such a system has been built-in standard features, so you don't start with a blank slate, but you have standardized features that every call center should have, but also has the components that can be switched on or taken out to make sure that you are providing the channels that your customers want to communicate across. The ideal solution also allows you to start small. It may be start small with a portion of your business. It may be moving your entire business over to it, even though you're not a large call center. But it allows you to move that portion of the business or to start the business small without having to start over if you change your mind. It's a solution that can be expanded and add to other channels as needed, like mobile or social media. So there's another, Forrester did a study, and it's a study on some key trends that customer service professionals need to pay attention to. And I'm just going to go through these very quickly because of, the time won't allow me to expand on each one of these. But as you plan for success, there are some top trends you need to look at. And you can get the detailed information for this. There's actually a link on the bottom of the slide that you can get, and it'll flush out basically a lot of the detailed information that's related to each one of these statements. But again, some of the things we talked about, and a few things I want to highlight. The channel preference is changing rapidly. There's some great data out there that talks about channel preference based on age, based on product types, and so forth. So you can really get a pretty good idea of what kind of plan you need to put together for your company to make sure that the channel preference is properly implemented. Mobile solutions, without a doubt, mostly with what we see from our company, banks, insurance companies, pretty much anybody that in the commercial lines wants to have a mobile solution. One of the issues you have with mobile solution is you get basically it's hard to get people to adopt your app because there's so many apps on the marketplace today. But if you can go through and make a seamless integration with the mobile solution in your contact center system, it's a huge win for your company. Agility, again, we talked about that a little bit, and the fact that you have to be agile enough to add new services, add new systems, add new channels, and so forth. And again, I won't go through all these just because of the time constraints, but I really encourage you to go out to Forrester and get the details of each one of these. In closing, I wanted to give you a couple takeaways, 3 takeaways. The first takeaway is adopt the business process-driven technology. Why this is important is at the end of the day, it's not really about a telephone call. It's about what drives the telephone call, and there has to be business processes that drive these telephone calls so that you can integrate billing, you can integrate customer history, you can integrate all the information that supports the call in a very sequential and organized fashion. It really helps you optimize what you're trying to get done. So in a sense, it somewhat self-guides each telephone call or each interaction across each channel, but it helps self-guide it in a uniform fashion. The second piece I want to talk about is adopt a modern contact center platform. And I can't emphasize this enough that many of the old platforms just don't have the capabilities, or if they have the capabilities, it's a tremendous amount of work, which equates to a tremendous amount of cost. And you have to try to force your business into what your technology model is, and that's just plain wrong. As your business, we talked about agility, as your business needs to be agile, needs to implement changes quickly, needs to launch new products quickly. You have to have a system that has the ability to either link in other systems or support systems or channels And a lot of times the older monolithic products just don't allow that. And third and final is adopt a deployment strategy that fits your company's needs. USAN is 100% cloud-based. It's fantastic, but it may not absolutely be the best solution for you. We hope it is, but I think it takes some time to look at it. And like I referenced before, USAN has some really good tools that'll help you objectively look at whether the cloud is the right solution for you. But balancing out the pieces of your company, is the cloud the right way to go? Can my IT staff support it? How are my customers going to enter it? What is the security? When you get into security, you're talking about HIPAA, you're talking about PCI, making sure that the cloud service that you look at has the same type of security that your internal systems have. Bottom line, companies must be able to allow their customers to pick and choose the channels they want. If you can't get to that point, most over the next couple of years, as quickly as all the channels are evolving, that will be a big Achilles heel for the company. So when you ask yourself, can I provide better customer experiences? Can I improve customer satisfaction levels? Can I scale to meet the demands of my company? Can I optimize my business processes? Can I connect my call center system to the rest of my enterprise? If the answer to all these questions is no, then I think it's well worth exploring the cloud, and we'd love to have you explore it with USAN. At USAN, we believe that we have the solution, hopefully, that you're looking for and can move your business forward. We invite you to visit our website or go to our social media destinations to learn more about us. And we'd love to discuss any kind of contact center technology challenges you may have. And hopefully we can find the right balance for your contact center, no matter what the size or where the contact center operates. So with that, Erica, I'd like to turn it back to you and look and see if we could have any questions, and I thank you for your time.
Great. Thank you very much, Lloyd. We do have some interesting questions coming in from the audience, and we are running a little bit short on time, so I think we'll have time to take one, but do not worry if we don't get a chance to answer your question live. We will be answering all questions offline, and we'll also write a follow-up article that will be posted to ICMI.com. So, Lloyd, I'll just ask you this one question because I've seen it come in a couple of times now. A couple of audience members are interested to know what you would recommend for dealing with the challenge of training agents that have so many different tools on their desktop that support various channels.
That's a great question. So there's a couple of things for agent training, and I'll take it a little bit down a technology path, and then I'll get back to the training side. So one of the things that we, from a training perspective, is looking at it from a unified desktop or a smart desktop, if you would. So I talked a little bit about the business process-driven interactions. One of the things about making business process interactions driven by an internal business process product is the fact that it's going to sequence out information to the agent in a very logical manner, and it's going to make the desktop smarter, so they're going to have the information they need to deal with each call. And by doing this, you make it very, very, very simple for an agent to stay on track. It makes them simple for them to accomplish what they need during the call and deliver a quality solution. So from a technology perspective, kind of the unified desktop is a really, really powerful tool that minimizes the amount of training that you need. The second piece, as far as agent training goes, there's a variety of different things that you can do from an agent training perspective. The most common today is in the modern systems is creating almost the avatar type training pieces where when the agents get the specific portions of their job, they can look at and refer back to more of an avatar, so it's an online video training. But in conjunction to this, to determine how much training or what type of training you need, there has to be built-in quality systems, such as agent surveys and things like that, agent self-help, that really helps the managers understand what the training needs are so that they can specifically implement that training.
Great. Thank you, Lloyd. Well, I'm afraid that unfortunately that's all the time we have for today. But as I did mention earlier, do not worry if we did not get to your question. We will post a follow-up article on ICMI.com and answer all the questions that are left in the queue today. In the meantime, if you think of other questions, feel free to reach out to us on Twitter. And don't forget, you can also download a PDF version of the slides through the console shortly after we end this presentation. I do need to mention that this presentation is copyright 2013 by ICMI. The presentation materials are owned by or copyrighted by ICMI, which is solely responsible for its content. and USAN is responsible for their content and opinions. On behalf of ICMI and our sponsor USAN, we thank you for attending today.